In this video, we're going to continue looking at django-allauth. Specifically, what we're going to do here is look at the accounts application that's part of django-allauth. So the package makes the distinction between regular accounts and also social accounts like Google, Amazon, and so on. And with these social accounts or third-party accounts, the authentication is delegated to an external identity provider. However, the accounts application controls authentication. We're going to look at that in this video. Before we get started, if you want to support the channel, check out our Ko-fi page. We've got a link to that just below the video. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Now, what the accounts application does is it gives you a complete and customizable local authentication system. So you can do things like sign up, log in, log out, and also password management and email verification is built into the accounts application. So that's really useful, and it can be combined with the third-party accounts if you want to use social logins as well as local authentication. And the accounts application ships with some templates that you can use and views, forms, rate limits, and so on. And all of this is highly customizable. Now, in the previous video, we installed django-allauth, and you can see in Django's installed apps, we have allauth.account as well as the core allauth package. And this account application is going to give us a lot of that useful functionality out of the box, and we're going to have a look at what it provides and how it can be customized in this video. Now let's get started, and what we're going to do is we're going to run the server with uv run manage.py run server. We can run that at the bottom to start the Django server, and we're going to go to localhost where we have this application. So we're now on the application. You can see we have a public page, and if we go to the URL and go to /secret, we have a secret page, but that has the login required decorator, so you have to be authenticated to view that page, and we're redirected to this login form. Now this login form and this login page comes from django-allauth. We saw it in the last video, but we're going to dive into it more in this video. We can actually sign into the application. We have this super basic username and password form, so we can sign in, but we can also customize this as we'll see later on. And we also have a few links here. For example, there's a link to actually sign up to the application, and that takes us to another form. This allows us to actually register, and again, this is all provided by django-allauth. And what we can do as well is we can reset our password. So there is some password reset functionality here that comes tied with email addresses. So we're going to look at that as well later on. Now let's start with sign up. And this gives users a way to sign up and then interact with our applications. I'm going to fill this form in. So I've filled in this form, and we're going to register with John Doe. And later on in this series, we'll see how to customize these templates that are provided by django-allauth. So let's now sign up to the application, and we're going to see a problem here from the off, and we're going to fix that in a second. And here we have the error. It's a connection refused error. So no connection can be made because the target machine actively refused it. Now this is subtle when you install django-allauth for the first time. If you try and register, it's going to try and send an email to the email address that you put into the form, but unless you configure emails, that's going to be refused because you don't have a valid email provider. So let's see how we can fix this, and this is going to show the configurable nature of django-allauth. So if we go to the accounts application, we can go to this page on configuration, and we can see here that we have a large page and there's lots of different settings that we can configure. But in order to turn off email confirmations, we can find the settings under email verification. And it's this setting that we see here called account email verification. The default value for that is optional. So this determines the email verification method during sign up, and it can be one of three values: mandatory, optional, or none. Now, obviously, if you set it to mandatory, what happens is that the user is going to be blocked from logging in until the email address is then verified. By making it optional, the email verification is still going to be sent to the user, but they can log in without verifying. So it's an optional step if they want to verify the email. And by setting it to none, that's going to allow logins with an unverified email address. So let's copy the name of this setting, and we're going to turn this off for now. So I'm going to go back to settings.py, and right at the bottom here, I'm going to add this setting, and we're going to set it to the string value of none. Now there's one other setting that I want to add here, and this is actually a Django setting. It's login redirect URL. And what we're going to do is we're going to redirect to the secret page when users log into the application. So we're going to set that up here as well. Login redirect URL. That's going to redirect to the secret page. Let's now go back to the form that we had. Now that we've added this setting here to turn off email verification, it's not going to try and send that email, and we're not going to get the connection refused error. So let's try and submit this form again with John Doe 2. When we sign up this time, we're going to get redirected to that secret page, and John Doe as a user is created and stored in the database. And if we look at the database itself, you can see we have two users here, John Doe and John Doe 2. They have both been created. So the actual creation process for the original user, that was successful. The user was created and stored in the database. It was just the email that was sent. That was the part that failed. So the user didn't receive the email, but they were created in the database. And if we look at the account email address table, you can see we have the data in this table now. So the user ID field, that's the foreign key to the user table that links it to the parent user. And you can see for both of these, the verified field is set to 0, in other words, false. So none of the two emails are verified at the moment. We're going to see what happens when we do verify those very soon. And in fact, what better time than now? Let's go back to settings.py, and instead of setting account email verification to none, we're now going to set it to optional, and that is going to send the verification email, but it's not going to prevent the user from logging in until they verify. The user can register and log in without verifying when this is set to optional. Now we don't want that connection refused error, so we're going to also have another setting here, and that's going to be the email backend setting. We're going to set that to Django's console email backend, and that means that the emails are not going to be sent over an SMTP connection. Instead, what's going to happen is the email will display on the terminal, and we can actually read the email on the terminal. That's very good for development and testing. So we can now go back to the sign up page, but what I'm going to do before that is show that we can actually log out of this application. So if we go to /accounts/logout, we're going to be taken to this sign out page, and we have this simple button at the bottom. Are you sure you want to sign out? And you can click yes to that, or you can click the button and you will be signed out of the application. So we have this logout functionality built in as well. It comes out of the box in the accounts application, and that is going to log us out, and we'll see how to log in very soon as well. What we're going to do now is go back to /accounts/signup, and we're going to try and sign up with a third user. So I've filled the form out at the bottom. We have John Doe 3, and we can sign up, and it's going to try and send that verification email. And we can see we are now redirected and logged in and sent to the secret page here. If we go to the terminal, notice that we have the email displayed on the terminal. And as well as the welcome message, we have this confirmation link here that we can then visit to confirm the email address. And what we're going to do now is go back to the application, and we can paste that in here, and we have the option to confirm the email address. And once we've done that, we can then go back to the database. And if we refresh the data in this table, notice we now have the third email address. And importantly, the verified column is set to true for that new email address. So django-allauth handles the registration and sign up process. It handles the email verification process, and it also logs the user into the application. And we can also, of course, log out of the application as well as change password. All of that functionality is there out of the box in django-allauth. And all we really had to do was add these couple of apps to installed apps and some of the other configuration from the first video. Now you might be wondering, where do the templates and the forms come from? And where does, for example, this email text come from here that we see in the terminal? Let's go to GitHub for django-allauth. And if we go to, for example, the account application, we can actually view the templates here. You can see all of these HTML files. And for example, if you want to look at the login page, we have login.html. And this is what you can copy and extend if you want to actually change the default templates. And we'll show another way to do that in a later video as well. So we have all of these templates built in, and they are extensible if you want to extend them and add your own styles or your own functionality. Now, if we go back to the application, we're logged in as that third user. Here is something else we can do that is not supported in Django itself, but django-allauth, as we said in the previous video, gives you the ability to have a user that has multiple email addresses instead of just tying a single email address to a single user. Now we can go to /accounts/email, and what this allows you to do is add a new email address to your user. So remember, we are logged in with John Doe 3, and we can add a second email address. So let's add johndoe@yahoo.com, and we have this message at the top that it sent a confirmation to that email address. And we can go back to the terminal here, and if we go to the bottom, you can see a message has been sent. And if you look at the to field here, you can see it's the Yahoo email address. So we can add an email address here. It will send the confirmation out. And you can see this form that we have here that allows us to set a primary email address. Now at the moment, it's John Doe 3. And we can see that that's verified, and it's the primary email address. we now have this Yahoo address as well, and that is currently unverified. Now, if we go to Beekeeper Studio, let's refresh this page, and we can see we now have rows 3 and 4 that are tied to the user who has the ID of 3. So this user has now 2 emails on the system, and it's the one in row 3 that has the primary flag set to true. So the account application in 𝗏𝗏 gives you the ability to set multiple email addresses for a user. That can be useful in certain circumstances. We're now going to move on, and we're going to look at adding some URLs to the templates. Now, if we go to the application just now, it's just a bit of text at the top here. We have no way of navigating around to different pages. We're going to change that just now by looking at the URLs that are provided by the 𝗏𝗏 account package. Now let's go to this template that we have, and that's in the core application. Inside the templates directory, we have an index and a secret page. What we're going to do is add a navbar, and I'm going to put that in a partials directory, and it's going to be navbar.html. So let's create a nav element, and I'm going to inline some styles here, font size of 24 pixels, and let's create an unordered list within that. And I'm going to close this off, and we're going to add some elements within the unordered list. Now let's say we want to allow the user to log in. What we can do here is add an li tag, and we can add an anchor tag here that has an href that uses Django's URL template tag. And what we're going to do is reference a django-allauth account URL. So it's going to be account underscore, and the particular URL that we want to go to here is login. So that's the URL name, account login. And let's close off this anchor tag, and we'll close off the li tag as well. Now we're going to learn a little bit about how to deal with authentication and navbars inside Django templates. But for now, let's go back to the page and let's refresh this page. And nothing happens because, of course, I haven't included the navbar inside base.html. So inside the body here, let's include partials/navbar.html. And that is not going to work either because partials is inside a core directory. So if we look at the templates directory here, we have core/partials/navbar.html. Let's now save this, and now we're going to see this login. Now one problem here is that we're already logged into the application. So if we go to the secret page here, we still see the login link, but we are actually logged in at the moment. And the way to deal with that in Django templates is to use an if statement to check if the user is authenticated. So what we can do is set up an if statement here, and user is available inside all Django templates, and it has a property we can check called isAuthenticated. So if the user is authenticated, we can show some links. Otherwise, if the user is not authenticated, we're going to give them the ability to log in inside this else block here, and don't forget to close the if statement. So now if we go back to the template here, refreshing this page makes the login link disappear because we're already logged in. We don't need to see that link anymore because we are actually authenticated. Now we might want to log out, so what we can do inside the if statement at the top is add an li tag for that, and it's going to be to a particular URL that you can see here called account logout. Now if we save that and go back to the page, we now see the logout link, and we can click that and be navigated to this page that allows us to log out of the application. And when we go back to this public page here, we now see the login link because we're no longer authenticated. Now we've already seen how to register. What we can also do is log in, and that means we can actually take an existing user that's already created and log into the application. So I'm going to do that with John Doe 3. Let's sign into the application, and we're going to be redirected to this secret page. Now I hope that this is all making sense. It shows the bulk of functionality that's offered by django-allauth. You get so much out of the box, and of course you can customize that using the configuration options and also overriding things like views, forms and templates. Now just to finish this section on URLs, what I'm going to do is replace these with a more comprehensive set of URLs. For example, if you're authenticated, you might want to add new email addresses, you might want to change your password, and of course log out of the application. Otherwise, if you're not already authenticated, you might want to log in or sign up. Let's save this and go back to the application. And now for a logged in user, you have the ability to add new email addresses and also remove them. And if we go back here, we can also change our password if we're already logged into the application. Now what I'm going to do is sign out of the application, and now we see the login and sign up links here. Let's go to sign up, and one thing you might want to do is customize what you actually see on this form. So we're going to move on now and look at a new setting in django-allauth. Let's go back to the configuration page. And under the sign up section, there's a setting called account sign up fields. Now the default for this is username, email, password 1 and password 2. And notice that some of these have this star next to them, and that means they're mandatory. On the other hand, the email is not required here. What we're going to do is change this and assume that we don't need to collect a username. We're going to allow users to authenticate and register using only the email address. So let's go back to VS Code and go back to settings.py. And again, at the bottom here, I'm going to paste in this setting of account sign up fields. And we're setting that to email, password 1 and password 2. Now, if we go back to the sign up form, we can see the username field here. We're going to see that that disappears when we refresh the page because it's no longer specified as an account sign up field. Therefore, it no longer appears in that form. And if you want to be the type of developer that makes users type in email twice, you can also put email to here. And that's going to make the user type in that email address twice, as you can see here. And it's going to make sure that they are matching email addresses. So you can do that if you really want to. I'm going to remove it and let's move on with the tutorial. Now there's another setting that's useful for signing up, and that's the account sign up form class. This allows you to point to a custom form class that can be used during sign up to ask the user for additional input. So for example, if you have a Boolean field on the user model that allows them to sign up for a newsletter or maybe the date of birth field for the user, you can specify these fields in a form and point this django-allauth setting to that form class. And django-allauth will then use that form when it displays this page here, and it's going to use all the fields on the form as well as any validation that you specify. Now one final thing to note here is this setting called account login methods. The default for this is username, but you can specify a Python set containing the different options you want, and that can be email, username, or a combination of both. And it specifies the login method to use, so the user can log in by entering either a username, an email address, or both. And this is important for what we just mentioned because the login methods that you have here, they need to align with that account sign up fields setting that we just specified. So let's go back to VS Code and we're going to comment out account sign up fields, and I'm going to paste account login methods here, and we're going to set that to email and username, and you can see these exist in a Python set. And let's go back to the application's sign in page here and notice that we have the login form, and we can enter either a username or an email address here in order to log in. So that gives users flexibility. They can log in with an email address or with a username. If we go back to settings.py, let's remove username from this and go back here. And when we refresh the page, notice that it's only the email address that can be used to log in. So we can see how customizable these things are. And if you need to get very customized, then you can actually create your own form classes for all of this and override views as well. Let's now move on and show one final configuration setting here. We're going to look for email codes, and specifically it's this setting here, account email verification by code enabled. By default this is false, but if you set that to true, what happens is that email verification is going to be performed by means of entering a code instead of following the link that we saw earlier on. So let's copy this, and again back to settings.py, and we're going to set that to true. And notice on the terminal that if you set this to true and you want to log in with a code, you need to set this to mandatory here. So account email verification, which we saw earlier on, it's currently set to optional. We're going to change that to mandatory. And now that we've set that to mandatory, we have a new problem here. When it's mandatory, it requires email to be in account sign up fields. So let's uncomment this here, and we can now save this, and hopefully that is now going to work. So let's now go back to the sign up page that we have. And notice we don't have a username, and we also don't have password fields here. And I'm going to sign up with an email of johndoe4@gmail.com. And what happens now is a different authentication flow. It enters, or it sends rather, an email verification code for us to enter here. And that email is sent to johndoe4. And notice the verification code is listed in the email. And again, these emails are default. They're built into Allauth, but they are customizable if you want to change the text and so on. But we can take that code and we can now enter it into this field, and we can confirm, and then we register with the application. So that's another way to register, this time via an email verification code. And that is used when the account email verification by code enabled setting is set to true. And we can also do this for login as well. So let me log out of this application, and I'm going to sign out here. And once we're signed out, we can go to the login page, and notice we don't have a password based login here. what we do is enter an email address. So I'm going to enter johndoe4@gmail.com, and that sends the sign-in code to John Doe's email address. And again, we can see that on the terminal if we go to the bottom. The sign-in code is listed below. We can copy that. And this time, if we enter that code, we are signed into the application and we can see the secret page. So that's another authentication flow, and that's become more common in recent times. Instead of a password-based login, you enter your email address and you're sent some kind of code that you can then enter in order to verify with the application and authenticate. Let's finish with a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the django-allauth account package. We can go back to this page here, and inside the accounts application, as well as configuration, which we've seen quite a bit, we also have custom or built-in views, forms, decorators, and so on. So if we go to the views page, there are different views that represent different actions in django-allauth. For example, if you want to log in, that is controlled by default by the login view, and there is a sign up view for signing up, and so on. Now these can be customized by extending these classes and implementing your own logic if you need to. And we also have similar for forms as well. So if we go to the forms page, we have a login form, and if we scroll down, a sign up form, and so on. You can extend these with your own forms, as you can see here, and then point the settings to the relevant form if you need to customize those workflows. And we also have a decorator in the account package, and that's the verified email required decorator. And you can use that if you want to make a view and its functionality only accessible if a user has verified their email address. And I want to touch on password management here. So if we go to the change password page, this is something you can access when you're already authenticated. So when you're logged in, you can change your existing password. And if you sign out of the application, you can then go to the login page. Now we don't have password functionality because we're now using the code, but if we were to comment these fields out here and go back to the page, let's refresh the page and we're going to get the old sign-in form. And actually we get an error here because this is set to mandatory. I'm going to set that back to optional for now, and we can then go back and refresh this page. If we've forgotten our password but we are not authenticated, on the login page we have this link to a password reset form, and I'm going to enter John Doe 4's email address here, and we can reset the password. And if we go back to the terminal, you get the password reset email. So that's secure. It uses an email to send a link to a page where you can then reset the password. So let's copy that link, go back to the application, and when we go to that page here, we can set a new password for John Doe 4. So we have this secure workflow for resetting passwords if we are not authenticated in the application. So again, this is all really useful functionality that's built in out of the box, and it saves you a lot of time. You can just include django-allauth in your application and you get access to all of the authentication functionality. And there's a couple of settings that you can use here. For example, account logout on password change. And that's a useful one if you want to log a user out when a password change happens, and that can log them out on all devices. Now let's look quickly at some of the other functionality. We have signals here. So if you want to hook into any part of an authentication workflow, you can use signals for that. For example, there's a signal when a user logs in and logs out, and also signals for when passwords are changed, reset, and so on. You can have a look at this page, and if you have any specific functionality that needs to happen at some part of an authentication workflow, django-allauth provides all of these signals that you can hook into. And I think we're going to look at an example of these in the next video. We also have the ability to do rate limiting out of the box in django-allauth, and you can configure these using the account rate limit setting, but we have these defaults as you can see at the bottom. For example, we have this change password action that's limited to 5 requests per minute per user. And I think it's really useful, it's really beneficial to have this rate limiting built into django-allauth. So that's not something extra that you have to configure, it's built in, and that helps prevent brute force attacks on your user passwords and so on. And that is amazing in my opinion. Most frameworks won't give you that by default with authentication. And the rate limiting mechanism is backed by Django's cache system. So it's not in the database, but the allauth rate limiting will use the Django cache, whether you're using the in-memory cache or Redis or memcached or so on. So I think that's worth noting at the end of this video. I just want to finish now by summarizing what we've got here in the allauth account package. So just by adding these two to installed apps and setting up the allauth URLs in urls.py, we got access to a huge amount of functionality relating to authentication. We can sign up and log in, and we can configure the fields and forms that are used to do so. We can do email verification, and that can be done with a link or via a code. And we can also have multiple email addresses per user account. We can also do password reset and password change, and also logout as well. So if a user wants to terminate their session, they can log out of the application. And we also looked in this video at navbar integration and integration with the URLs that are provided by django-allauth. And finally, we saw a bit about rate limiting and signals and so on. And all of this is done before you've actually had to write any code yourself. So you get an enormous amount of functionality out of the box here, and I think that's super useful. Now we're going to look in more detail in the next video about customizing the authentication. So we're going to create a user profile model in Django that has a one-to-one relation with the user model, and we'll create a custom form to capture additional user details and a custom view to add some kind of login success message on the front end. And possibly some other stuff. I've not actually prepared that yet, but that's coming up in the next video. And thank you for watching this video. It's been a bit of a whirlwind tour of the account application. If you want to support the channel and you're finding this content useful, check out our Ko-fi page. And if you want to become a member of the channel, check out memberships. We've recently opened these as well. And that's all for this video. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you soon in the next video.